Long ago, in a quiet little village, there lived a poor farmer and his wife. Day after day, they worked hard in the fields, plowing, planting, and tending the crops with all their strength. Life, however, was far from easy. Poverty clung to them like a shadow, and every day felt like a struggle. Yet, what burdened them most was not the endless labor or the scarcity of food, but the painful emptiness in their hearts. They had no children. Their home was silent, lacking the laughter and cries of a child, and their hearts grew heavier with each passing year. One stormy night, the winds howled and thunder roared across the sky. The farmer, worried about his fields, walked along the muddy path to check his crops. Suddenly, through the sound of the storm, he heard a faint cry, a baby's cry. Surprised and alarmed, he stopped in his tracks, straining his ears. Following the sound, he stumbled upon a sight that stopped his heart. A tiny baby boy, wrapped in a thin cloth, shivering by the edge of the field. Without hesitation, the farmer bent down, gently lifted the fragile infant into his arms, and held him close to shield him from the cold rain. The baby's sobs softened as he felt the warmth of the farmer's chest. In that moment, the farmer knew his life and his wife's life would never be the same. This child was no accident. He felt as though fate itself had placed the baby in his care. When the farmer returned home with the baby, his wife was utterly shocked. She stared wide-eyed at the tiny bundle in her husband's arms. But soon her surprise gave way to overwhelming emotion. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Perhaps heaven has sent this child to us." Her heart, once weighed down with sadness, now swelled with hope and joy. From that day on, the couple raised the boy as their very own. Though they had little, they poured all the love and devotion they possessed into caring for him. Their small house, once so quiet, was now filled with the sounds of life, the baby's cries, his laughter, and eventually his sweet voice calling them mother and father. The couple's days of longing turned into days of fulfillment. As the years passed, the boy grew strong and healthy. He was not only obedient but also kind and hardworking. From a young age, he helped his parents in the fields, plowing the soil, planting seeds, carrying water, and tending the crops. Unlike many others who often grumbled and complained, the boy worked in silence with patience and diligence. He carried every task with quiet determination, and his humble nature made him stand out in the eyes of those who truly noticed. For the farmer and his wife, the boy became their greatest pride and joy. His presence was nothing less than a miracle, a gift of fate that transformed their lives forever. To them, he was not just a child they had found, he was their son, their blessing, and their reason to keep striving through every hardship. As the boy grew older, his efforts in the fields began to bear extraordinary results. His crops flourished more abundantly than anyone else's. The grains in his field grew larger and healthier, and every harvest brought an abundance that surprised even the farmer and his wife. Their small plot of land yielded more than the larger fields of other villagers, and soon it became clear that their harvests were consistently the best in the village. But instead of rejoicing for his success, the villagers' hearts turned sour with envy. Whispers spread among them. He must be using tricks. No one else's crops grow like that. Some mocked him to his face, while others spread malicious rumors behind his back. A few even went so far as to damage his tools or trample his young plants when he wasn't watching. Despite this constant hostility, the young man never raised his voice in anger. He did not argue, nor did he fight back. Instead, he continued to work even harder, maintaining the same respect and kindness toward everyone around him. His calmness and quiet perseverance only deepened the mystery for the villagers, who refused to believe that hard work and patience alone could yield such rewards. The truth, however, was simple. His success was not born of trickery or luck, but of his diligence, discipline, and unwavering will. Yet the villagers, blinded by jealousy, could not see it. For the young man, this was a test of character, whether he would allow bitterness to consume him, or whether he would remain steadfast in kindness amidst envy and cruelty. Though the young man endured years of unfair treatment, he never allowed anger to poison his heart. Day after day, he quietly toiled in the fields, carrying himself with dignity and respect toward everyone, even those who despised him. Then one year, disaster struck. The rains came heavier than ever before. Rivers swelled and overflowed, flooding the fields. Crops were washed away, leaving only devastation behind. When the storm finally passed, the land lay ruined. The once lush green fields were now nothing more than soggy mud, the stalks of rice broken and rotting. The village fell into despair. With their crops destroyed, families had no food to eat and no seeds to plant for the future. Children cried from hunger, their frail bodies weakening day by day. Parents sat helplessly, powerless to ease the suffering of their little ones. Hopelessness settled like a dark cloud over the entire village. But amid this tragedy, one person still had grain left, the young farmer. Unlike the others, he had saved and stored some of his harvest carefully, preparing for times of need. He could have chosen to keep it all for himself, ensuring his own survival, while the rest of the village starved. Yet his heart did not allow such selfishness. Instead, he looked at the suffering around him and resolved to act. He realized that the grain in his storage was not just his lifeline, it could be the salvation of an entire community. In that moment, his true character shone brighter than ever before, compassionate, selfless, and determined to share his blessings with others. As night fell and the village lay in silence, the young man began his secret mission. Quietly, he lit his fire, cooked the grain he had saved, and carefully packed portions of food. Then, under the cover of darkness, he carried the meals to the homes of his neighbors. Gently, he placed the food at their doors and slipped away before anyone could see him. The next morning, the villagers awoke to a miracle. At their doorsteps, they found warm food waiting. The children, who had gone to bed hungry, were able to eat. The adults, weary with despair, gained new strength to carry on. Day after day, the same miracle occurred. Though no one knew who was behind it, the mysterious gifts kept the village alive during those desperate times. Whispers spread about a secret benefactor. Some called it the mercy of heaven, while others believed an unseen spirit was watching over them. No one ever suspected that it was the very man they mocked and scorned. Yet during the day, the cruelty did not cease. Villagers still hurled insults at him, unaware that the hands they ridiculed were the very ones feeding them. Sometimes, as he sat alone after a long day of work, the young man wondered, why does goodness invite hatred? Why is kindness so often repaid with pain? Though burdened with doubt, he never stopped his nightly deeds. For him, true happiness came not from recognition, but from knowing that children no longer cried from hunger, and that families still had a chance to survive. His silent compassion had become the heartbeat of the entire village. Unknown to most, one old man in the village had witnessed the truth. Too frail to farm, he spent much of his time observing the world around him. One restless night, unable to sleep, he saw a familiar figure walking through the darkness. It was the young man, carrying bundles of food. The old man watched as he stopped at each door, leaving warm meals before quietly vanishing into the shadows. Night after night, the old man confirmed what he had seen. Each time, his heart swelled with admiration and gratitude. He knew that without this young man, many lives in the village would already have been lost. The next day, when the villagers gathered, the old man could hold his silence no longer. Summoning his strength, he stood and raised his voice. You call this young man a cheat, a liar, and mock him endlessly. But do you know who has been keeping you alive? Who has been feeding your children while you slept? It is he, the very man you despise. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Faces turned pale, and guilt surged through their hearts. They recalled the mysterious food that had appeared at their doors and realized at last the truth. Shame washed over them as they lowered their heads. For the first time, the villagers looked at the young man not with envy or hatred, but with remorse and a glimmer of respect. The revelation pierced through their blindness, awakening them to the kindness they had long rejected. Just as the villagers were grappling with their shame, a sudden stir spread through the village. Royal riders arrived, bearing the seal of the king. They announced that many years ago, during a terrible storm, the king and queen had lost their infant son. For years they had searched in vain, until new clues led them here. When the royal guards saw the young man, their eyes fell upon a distinctive mark on his body, the very birthmark described in the records of the lost prince. The truth became undeniable. This young farmer, once scorned by the villagers, was in fact the long-lost prince of the kingdom. The news spread like wildfire. Villagers stood in disbelief, their hearts sinking as they remembered how they had mocked, wronged, and harmed him. Fear replaced shame, for they now realized they had mistreated their future king. Soon after, the king and queen themselves arrived. The moment they laid eyes on the young man, tears streamed down their faces. They rushed forward, embracing him with trembling arms. Years of grief and longing dissolved in an instant, replaced by overwhelming joy at the miracle of reunion. Meanwhile, the villagers bowed their heads low, trembling with dread. They recalled their cruelty, their jealousy, their unkindness, and now faced the weight of their sins. What had seemed like ordinary envy was now revealed as an offense against their very prince. That moment was more than a family reunion. It was destiny revealed. It marked the beginning of a transformation, not just for the prince, but for the entire village. Upon hearing of his son's suffering, the king's heart burned with anger. Furious at how the villagers had treated the prince, he commanded his soldiers to punish them. The villagers fell to their knees, trembling, certain that their end had come. But before the soldiers could act, the young man, now recognized as the prince, knelt before his parents. With a steady voice he pleaded, "Father, mother, please do not harm them. When they wronged me, I forgave them. How can I ask for vengeance now when all is revealed? Let mercy triumph." His words struck the king and queen deeply. Their son, who had endured hardship and cruelty, now chose forgiveness over revenge. Tears welled in their eyes as they embraced him again, proud not only of his royal blood, but of his noble heart. The villagers, overwhelmed, began to weep. Guilt and sorrow poured from their hearts, but so too did gratitude for the mercy shown to them. For the first time they saw in the prince not only a ruler, but a savior. From that day forward, he was not merely the heir to the throne, but became known throughout the land as the Prince of Mercy. His compassion turned enemies into followers, and his kindness softened even the hardest of hearts. The farmer and his wife, the humble couple who had raised him, were brought to the palace and honored as the parents who had nurtured the future king. They lived the rest of their lives in happiness and dignity, proud of the son they had loved as their own. The story of the merciful prince spread far and wide across the kingdom. Everywhere, people spoke of the young man who forgave those who had wronged him, and who showed kindness even when he had suffered most. His name became a symbol of compassion, and his title, the Prince of Mercy, was carried with reverence. The farmer and his wife, who had raised him from infancy, were celebrated throughout the land. The king and queen honored them not only as guardians of the prince, but as true parents. From then on, the couple lived in peace and abundance within the palace, surrounded by respect and love, after a lifetime of struggle and hardship. For the villagers, the memory of their shame never faded. They often recalled the moment when they bowed in fear, expecting punishment, only to receive forgiveness instead. That act of mercy became their greatest lesson. They realized that cruelty, envy, and malice are like storms. They arrive suddenly, wreak havoc, but always pass away. What endures is kindness, quiet, steadfast, and everlasting. The prince's compassion had not only saved lives, but it also healed hearts, hardened by jealousy. It lit a flame of hope in the darkest of times and reminded all who heard the tale that kindness is never wasted. Even when unrecognized or misunderstood, it carries the power to transform lives. And so the story lived on as a guiding truth for generations. Cruelty may rise like a tempest, but it will always fade. What remains is kindness, an eternal light of love, hope, and mercy.